December 1944. Allied commanders gathered at Verdun received news that defied belief. One general claimed his army could pivot 90 degrees, march through the worst winter conditions in living memory, and launch a counter-offensive within 72 hours. Most thought it impossible. Hitler's surprise thrust through the Ardennes had torn a 50-mile gap in Allied defences. Wehrmacht commanders believed they had achieved the unthinkable: complete strategic surprise against American forces. 3 German armies, 250,000 soldiers and 1,000 tanks surged toward Antwerp through frozen forests, threatening to split British and American forces and force a negotiated peace. But German planners had overlooked one critical factor. Lieutenant General George Patton commanded the Third Army to the south. And in the frigid December of 1944, this 59-year-old commander would demonstrate that audacity, preparation, and relentless aggression could transform a desperate situation into decisive victory. Born into military tradition in 1885, Patton had spent his entire adult life preparing for the moment when everything would depend on leadership under fire. By December 1944, commanding over 250,000 men and hundreds of armoured vehicles, he had established himself as the most aggressive tank commander in the Allied armies. But December 16, 1944, changed the entire strategic picture. While the Third Army advanced through the Saar region, planning their own offensive into Germany's industrial heartland, Hitler unleashed Unternehmen Wacht am Rhein Operation, Watch on the Rhine. Before dawn, 29 German divisions crashed into thinly held American positions in the Ardennes forest. The Wehrmacht's plan was breathtaking in scope: drive 60 miles through Belgium and Luxembourg, seize Antwerp's vital port, split the British from the Americans. What made the assault so devastating was not merely its size, but the element of complete surprise. Allied intelligence had entirely missed the massive German buildup. The Wehrmacht had concentrated 250,000 troops and 1,000 tanks using only night movements and absolute radio silence. When the attack began, it achieved total tactical surprise. Within hours, German armour raced westward, shattering American positions and creating chaos in Allied command centres. The decisive moment arrived December 19th. General Dwight Eisenhower called an emergency conference at Verdun. The situation was grave. German forces had already penetrated 20 miles into Belgium, threatening critical road junctions and the strategic town of Bastogne. The First Army reeled in confusion, with entire units scattered or destroyed. If the German advance continued at this pace, they might actually reach Antwerp and achieve their objective. Understanding what happened next requires understanding the man who would determine the battle's outcome. Patton's path to this moment had been anything but straightforward. His brilliant campaigns in North Africa and Sicily were tarnished by incidents where he physically struck 2 soldiers suffering from combat fatigue. The scandal nearly ended his career and kept him from the initial D-Day landings. Yet his reputation for aggressive leadership and tactical brilliance made him indispensable. The Germans feared him more than any other Allied commander, so much so that he became the centerpiece of an elaborate deception operation that convinced German intelligence he would lead the invasion at Calais rather than Normandy. By the time Third Army entered France in July 1944, Patton had learned to channel his aggressive instincts more effectively. His leadership style remained unique among Allied commanders. While others directed operations from secure command posts, Patton spent his days visiting frontline units, often riding in an open jeep through enemy fire. He understood that soldiers needed to see their commander sharing their danger. The Third Army's rapid advance across France had already demonstrated Patton's tactical genius. After breaking out from Normandy, his forces had covered 600 miles in 4 months, liberating thousands of square miles and capturing hundreds of thousands of German prisoners. But autumn 1944 brought frustration. Supply shortages and fierce German resistance in places like Metz had slowed the advance to a crawl. Some questioned whether Patton was only effective in pursuit, less capable against determined opposition. The Battle of the Bulge would prove those doubts spectacularly wrong. What Patton proposed at the Verdun Conference defied conventional military wisdom. When Eisenhower asked how quickly the Third Army could turn north to counterattack, Patton's answer stunned everyone present: 72 hours. While other commanders were still trying to comprehend the scale of the German offensive, Patton was already steps ahead. Unknown to those at Verdun, his intelligence staff had noticed unusual German activity and drafted 3 separate contingency plans for a northward turn. This was Patton's genius. He didn't merely react to events, he anticipated them. The scope of what he proposed was staggering. Pull 6 full divisions from active combat, turn them 90 degrees, march them over 100 miles through the worst winter weather in decades, all while maintaining combat readiness. Most military experts would have called it impossible. Moving an army while engaged with the enemy ranks among the most difficult military maneuvers. Doing it in winter over frozen roads while maintaining secrecy seemed utterly beyond reach. But Patton grasped something that textbooks couldn't teach: the power of bold action to transform desperate situations into decisive victories. His philosophy was straightforward attack, always attack. He believed the enemy was invariably weaker than they appeared, and that rapid, aggressive action could overcome nearly any disadvantage. This wasn't reckless courage. It was calculated aggression based on thorough preparation and intimate understanding of the enemy's limitations. The German plan contained a fundamental weakness that Patton immediately identified. Hitler's offensive demanded perfect timing and flawless execution. German forces carried only enough fuel for 6 days of operations, depending on capturing Allied fuel depots to continue their advance. They needed to reach their objectives quickly before Allied air power could intervene and before American reinforcements arrived. Any delay would doom the offensive. Patton's solution was simple in concept, but immensely complex in execution. Instead of attempting to stop the German offensive where it was strongest, he would strike where they were most vulnerable, at the base of the Bulge. His 3-division assault would not only relieve the surrounded garrison at Bastogne, but also threaten to trap the entire German spearhead. December 19th. Patton left the Verdun Conference and immediately activated his plan. He contacted headquarters and spoke 2 words: play ball. This code phrase triggered pre-arranged operational orders his staff had prepared. Within hours, over 133,000 Third Army vehicles began one of history's most complex military movements. The 4th Armoured Division, the 81st Infantry Division, and the 26th Infantry Division started their march north, followed by support convoys transporting 62,000 tons of supplies. The conditions they faced were brutal beyond description. Europe was experiencing its coldest winter in living memory. Temperatures hovered around -7 degrees Celsius, with snow that reduced visibility to nearly 0. American troops lacked adequate winter clothing. Many soldiers had only cotton field jackets and wool overcoats against the bitter cold. Weapons froze and required constant maintenance. Truck engines needed starting every 30 minutes to prevent oil from congealing. But Patton had prepared for this moment in ways that transcended mere logistics. He understood that winter combat was as much a battle of morale as material. While other commanders sought shelter in heated headquarters, Patton made himself visible to his troops. He travelled constantly in an open jeep, his only concession to the freezing temperatures being a heavy winter parka. His face often froze, but he continued his daily inspections, ensuring word of his presence spread through the ranks. The psychological impact was enormous. American soldiers fighting in conditions that would have broken lesser units drew strength from knowing that old blood and guts was enduring their hardship. His words of encouragement and praise circulated rapidly through Third Army's communication networks. This wasn't empty rhetoric. Patton genuinely believed his soldiers capable of the impossible, and his conviction became theirs. As the Third Army prepared for its northward pivot, Patton took an unusual step. On December 8th, even before the German offensive began, he had telephoned his chief chaplain, Monsignor James Hugh O'Neill, a 52-year-old Catholic priest who had served in the army since 1926. "Do you have a good prayer for weather?" Patton asked. "We must do something about those rains if we are to win the war." O'Neill searched his prayer books but found nothing suitable. He composed an original prayer, typing it on a small card. "Almighty and most merciful Father, we humbly beseech thee, of thy great goodness, to restrain these immoderate rains with which we have had to contend. Grant us fair weather for battle. Graciously hearken to us as soldiers who call upon thee, that armed with thy power we may advance from victory to victory and crush the oppression and wickedness of our enemies." Patton read it and immediately ordered 250,000 copies, printed one for every soldier in the Third Army. The last cards were distributed on December 14th, just 2 days before Hitler launched his offensive. When Patton called O'Neill to discuss the prayer, the chaplain admitted that not much praying was happening in the army. Patton responded with characteristic directness: "Issue a directive." O'Neill did, sending orders to the Third Army's 486 chaplains, representing 32 denominations. Pray when driving, pray when fighting, pray alone, pray with others. Whether divine intervention or meteorological chance, on December the 23rd, the weather cleared dramatically. The dense cloud cover vanished. Clear skies allowed Allied air power to unleash its full strength on German positions. Patton called O'Neill to his office. "God damn, that O'Neill sure did some potent praying. Get him up here. I want to pin a medal on him." The next day, Patton pinned a bronze star on the chaplain's chest, making O'Neill the only soldier in World War II to receive a medal for writing a prayer. The German response to Patton's maneuver revealed both his strategic genius and the Wehrmacht's fundamental misunderstanding of American capabilities. General Erich Brandenberger, commanding the German 7th Army facing Patton's sector, had expected a rapid American reaction. He knew Patton's reputation for aggressive armored warfare. He had even acknowledged that Patton conducted operations according to fundamental German concepts of mobile warfare. But even Brandenberger was stunned by the speed and precision of Third Army's northward pivot. German commanders hadn't believed any Allied force could execute such a complex maneuver under winter conditions. The Wehrmacht's own experiences in Russia had taught them how winter could completely paralyze even the most effective military machine. They assumed American forces, with their reputation for dependence on comfort and logistics, would be even more susceptible to winter's effects. This miscalculation revealed a fundamental flaw in German strategic thinking by late 1944. They continued to underestimate American military effectiveness, viewing United States forces as materially wealthy but lacking in fighting spirit and tactical skill. German General Günther Blumentritt would later admit, "We regarded General Patton extremely highly as the most aggressive tank general of the Allies. His operations impressed us enormously, probably because he came closest to our own concept of the classical military commander." But by December 1944, the Wehrmacht was no longer the force that had conquered Europe in 1940. The divisions attacking in the Ardennes were a mixture of elite formations and hastily assembled units, filled with teenagers and aging men. Many German troops hadn't eaten properly in days and lacked adequate winter gear. Their vehicles ran on synthetic fuel that performed poorly in cold weather, and their supply lines were already strained beyond breaking point. The battle that developed around Bastogne demonstrated the transformation of the American army from the novice force that landed in North Africa in 1942 into a seasoned professional military. The 101st Airborne Division's defense of Bastogne became legendary, but it was Patton's relief operation that transformed a defensive stand into an offensive triumph. When German commanders demanded Bastogne's surrender on December 22nd, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe's one-word reply, "Nuts," became an enduring symbol of American resolve. That same day, in the midst of a massive snowstorm, Patton's 3-division army attacked. The assault shocked German forces who had assumed winter conditions would prevent any major Allied counteroffensive. Along a 20-mile front, American tanks and infantry smashed into the German flank, driving 7 miles into enemy positions on the first day. The combat was ferocious. American forces, driven by Patton's constant demands for aggressive action, refused to yield ground. The 4th Armored Division, spearheading Patton's advance toward Bastogne, faced some of the finest remaining units in the German army. Tiger and Panther tanks, the Wehrmacht's most fearsome armor-fought Sherman tanks and tank destroyers across frozen fields that quickly became killing grounds. The breakthrough came on December the 26th. Elements of the 4th Armored Division's 37th Tank Battalion, led by Lieutenant Charles Bulge, broke through German defences and linked up with the 101st Airborne inside Bastogne. The corridor they opened was only 500 yards wide, but it shattered the German encirclement and enabled massive reinforcement of the American garrison. But Patton wasn't satisfied. While other commanders might have been content with relieving Bastogne, he saw the larger opportunity. The German offensive had dangerously overextended their forces, creating opportunities for devastating counterattacks. "Brad," he told General Bradley, "this time the Kraut stuck his head in the meat grinder and I've got hold of the handle." The destruction of German forces in the Ardennes took 6 weeks. American and German soldiers fought in foxholes carved from frozen earth, weapons seizing up from cold. By January 16, 1945, when American forces from north and south met at Houffalize, the Bulge was eliminated. The German offensive, which Hitler had hoped would shatter Allied unity, had instead become a catastrophe for the Wehrmacht. German casualties exceeded 100,000 men, with over 700 tanks and 1,600 aircraft destroyed. Germany had squandered the last of its strategic reserves. American losses were equally severe, over 80,000 casualties, including nearly 20,000 dead, making it the costliest battle the United States Army had ever fought. Patton's ability to reposition 6 full divisions in 72 hours while maintaining their combat effectiveness stands as one of military history's most extraordinary logistical achievements. The Battle of the Bulge proved that George Patton was far more than an aggressive tank commander. He was a strategic visionary who understood that bold action could transform dire circumstances into decisive victories. The Germans, who had mocked American military competence in December, were no longer laughing in January. They had learned at terrible cost that American soldiers, led by commanders like Patton, could fight and win under the most extreme conditions. Winston Churchill called the Battle of the Bulge undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war. For Patton, it represented vindication, a lifetime dedicated to preparing for the moment when everything would depend on one man's ability to turn an impossible situation into inevitable victory. The battle revealed a fundamental truth about warfare. Superior leadership, aggressive action, and absolute confidence could overcome any tactical disadvantage. The Germans had launched their offensive believing winter weather and American inexperience would guarantee success. Instead, they discovered that Patton's Third Army could fight anywhere, anytime, and against any enemy. The Ardennes became not Hitler's triumph, but his final defeat, the moment when American forces achieved their finest hour in the crucible of winter warfare. 72 hours. That was all the time Patton needed to turn the tide of the largest battle ever fought by the United States Army. 6 divisions, 100 miles, the coldest winter in living memory, and a commander who refused to accept that anything was impossible. The Battle of the Bulge claimed over 19,000 American lives and wounded tens of thousands more. But it also marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. Hitler's last gamble had failed. The road to Berlin lay open. George Patton would not live to see his legacy fully realised. He died in a car accident in Germany just months after the war ended. But his name would forever be linked with that frozen December when an aging general and his Third Army proved that courage, preparation, and relentless determination could overcome any obstacle. The snow has long since melted from the fields of the Ardennes. The scars of battle have faded, but the lesson remains that in the darkest moments, when defeat seems certain, leadership makes all the difference. Stories like this deserve to be remembered. If this account of Patton's finest hour resonated, consider subscribing. There are countless untold stories from the Second World War, stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, stories that shape the world we live in today. The men who fought in the Bulge are nearly all gone now, but their legacy endures in the freedom they fought to preserve. Remember them,